All right, our next guest is a civil engineer and environmental sociologist who studies how we as a society can create decarbonization policy that is both effective and ethical. Professor Emily Grubert, welcome to Notre Dame Day.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, a primary focus of your research is deep decarbonization. Could you give us an idea of what that encompasses?
Yeah, absolutely. So deep decarbonization is really the practice of getting to zero carbon emissions and really stopping the ongoing contributions to climate change. From a more direct perspective, what that really looks like is remaking essentially 80% of our energy system and a lot of our industrial system too. So it's both a technical issue and also very much a social and people issue.
Now, being that it does involve ethics, ethical decarbonization policy, what does that look like and how can we ensure ethical decision making while still aggressively fighting climate crisis?
Yeah, and I think honestly, aggressively fighting the climate crisis is the ethical pathway here. It's just how we do that exactly becomes the tricky part. The way that I tend to think about it is how we really think about providing people services and making sure that, we all have enough heat, we all have enough cooling, we all have enough ability to thrive, and really trying to organize this significant opportunity is, I think, one of the greatest calls that we have at this point for ethical action.
And one of those is carbon capture. It's a hot topic right now in decarbonization. Some say it's the future, others say it's an unsustainable solution. Do you see a path to carbon capture becoming viable anytime soon?
It's an interesting question. I think there are some areas where it's really not the best solution that we have. So particularly in the power sector, we have other things that we can do to make electricity. There are a couple spaces where we probably do need to know whether we're capable of doing carbon capture. So things like cement plants potentially, but also things like taking CO2 that's already out of the atmosphere in a form that's more oriented around carbon dioxide removal.
Now, could you give us an example of any recent innovations that excite you to this day?
Yeah, I'm really excited about geothermal for heating. I think one of the biggest challenges from both a justice perspective and a decarbonization perspective is how to keep people warm in the winter time. And so really learning how to do that with the heat of the earth is an exciting strategy.
Now, you've spoken about the need for an interdisciplinary approach to decarbonization and the climate crisis. What does that approach look like on the campus of Notre Dame?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one of the big strengths that we have at Notre Dame is that we're pretty comfortable with normativity. So the idea that we should do ethical things, we should prioritize human dignity, and climate change is probably bad, I think we're typically pretty comfortable with. And so having people from all kinds of disciplinary backgrounds who are willing to engage that question is a real strength.
Now, with that, too, what advice would you give a non-engineering student looking to make a difference to combat the climate crisis?
Yeah, I mean, we need so much more work on this. I think at this point, there are certainly engineering challenges left, but we have most of the technology that we need. This is largely a people problem at this point.
Now, what are some of the things that maybe some people don't know about decarbonization policy that, would necessarily spark interest, but also sort of expand the knowledge about it?
Yeah, I think the big thing probably is just how much work we have to do. So that's simultaneously terrifying and actually kind of helpful. But when we're really talking about completely remaking the energy system, there are so many opportunities to make this better. And I think that it's not just an around the edges kind of a thing anymore.
When it comes to potential solutions and policy, is there anything that's sort of sticking out and sort of gaining some sort of traction and ground to this point?
Yeah, so I think we're actually at the point where people generally agree that we need to electrify things, so moving off of direct use of fossil fuels, using electricity from renewables instead, and then making sure that electricity is coming from clean sources. So it's nice to see that coalescence coming together, and I think there's a lot of focus on buildings now as well.
All right, well, Emily, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and for joining us here on Notre Dame Day.
Thanks for having me.